I always start out at the Four Seasons because they have sky high restaurant and bar, and you can see the entire city. A lot of people don't understand how big Philly really is, and I love for them to see the skyline as the sunset is going down with a cocktail in hand.
Welcome to Unpacked by Afar. I'm Aislinn Green, and that clip you just heard is just one of the many tips the Afar team gathered at IPW. Now, IPW is this annual travel conference organized by the U.S. Travel Association to share the best of America with the rest of the world. And in this special Unpacked episode, Michelle Baran, Afar's deputy editor, is sharing her takeaways from interviewing 9 different tourism CEOs, and what she discovered was eye-opening. There's the surprising youth of America's tourism marketing efforts and the real impact of recent policy changes on both international visitors and American travelers. You can head over to our View from Afar podcast to hear all of those episodes. We've linked to them in the show notes. But first, let's unpack what it all means for you as a traveler and why Michelle came away from these conversations feeling more inspired about American travel than she has in years. Well, Michelle, we just spent, maybe 2 days in a small podcast booth on the floor of IPW. How are you feeling now that we're back?
Good, tired. It was very fun and very intense and a lot of amazing conversations and a lot to digest and process.
I know. I was surprised by how informed and inspired I felt at the end of these 2 days of 19 interviews. It was
100%.
Really heartwarming. So let's kick things off with some of the newsiest aspects of your conversation. So you interviewed Geoff Freeman, who's the president and CEO of the U.S. Travel Association, and they're the people who put on IPW. So what was your overall takeaway from that conversation?
Yeah. So the big takeaway from that conversation, and honestly, a lot of conversations that we had throughout the conference, was just that travel is something that we can't nor should we take for granted. And I got the sense that it was something that the U.S. had been taking for granted really up until 9/11. So that's what Geoff Freeman got into. That's when U.S. travel was established. And I think up until that time, it was just sort of assumed that America is this great place, and of course, everybody wants to go there. And that's not necessarily the case, right? It's sort of like, shocker, there are other places in the world to go and that might be more interesting to people. And so it struck me, this idea that, no, actually, we have to make an effort to tell people, to come here, or to convince them, or to court them in a way. And so U.S. travel came around to kind of start to formalize this process of how do we convince people that convince the government, first of all, to get that support, that travel is this really important industry that needs support, needs funding, needs infrastructure, because it supports so much of our economy. Yeah, so that was sort of the one big thing. And then I also came to better understand the difference between U.S. Travel Association, which is the organization, sort of almost like the lobbying group for the travel industry, and Brand USA. So Brand USA is basically the marketing organization. It's the organization that goes out and literally sort of advertises the U.S. to different source markets around the world and tries to let people know what there is to see and do here.
Yeah, that was surprising to me too, that Brand USA was such a young organization,
right,
that wasn't something that we were actively doing as a country.
Right.
And I think also that idea that tourism is such a kind of a big economic driver here, but we don't talk about it much. It's like this hidden thing, whereas in other countries, it's a core and key part of their economy.
Exactly. It's a major industry, and it also touches all corners. It's not just, I think people think travel and tourism, they think, okay, New York, California, the big tourism cities, but an organization like Brand USA and then all these other smaller organizations that promote travel, they touch the small communities throughout the country. There's so many places, big and small, that rely so heavily on travel. And like I said, it's taken for granted.
Yes,
That's just assume that people will come, or that these, industries don't need to fight for it.
And one of the things that we were going to discuss today, because Geoff mentioned in your conversation the importance of funding for Brand USA.
Right.
And with the passage of the big, beautiful bill, they took a big economic hit. Would you share?
On July 4th, President Trump signed the big, beautiful bill into law. And unfortunately, with the passage of that bill, Brand USA lost 80% of its funding. So down from $100 million to $20 million. And this is where it's sort of like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for the country? What does that mean for travelers? Well, for the country, it is worrisome because, like I said, Brand USA is designed to literally spread the wealth. So it's designed to be this sort of umbrella marketing group that promotes the U.S. as a travel destination so that then that can filter out throughout all destinations across the country. So they do a really good job, for example, of like if you're into the outdoors, like here's 20 different, outdoorsy activities that are really popular in the United States so that people can get a better understanding of the breadth of experiences. So Brand USA's reach and the funding that they get is used to spread that message in ways that smaller communities wouldn't be able to because they just don't have that funding, don't have that reach. So it will have a trickle down effect to all the different communities that rely on travel and tourism when Brand USA isn't able to as effectively market that message. It also comes at a time when there's a lot of concerns, and this came up a lot at the conference, about how America is perceived in terms of being a welcoming destination. And there is a lot of concerns about the policies in place, whether that's the travel ban, whether that's our policies at the borders and people being turned away at the borders or having their devices searched, that, all of these destinations, including U.S. travel and individual destinations, are worried that that sends a message that people are not welcome to come here when, in fact, they want to get the message out like, please, no, we want you to come. We really do. We absolutely welcome you. And of course, your travel dollars in the U.S. So there is this tension right now between those two issues. And it was very much on display at IPW. And I was honestly really impressed with the ways in which the different destinations, which, marketers, they want to, shed a happy light, and that, they don't, I feel like they tend to shy away from controversial topics. And in this case, I feel like the message was very clear. We want to be perceived as a welcoming destination.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, happily surprised by how many people so clearly stated that message. And we'll talk about some of those specific people in a moment. But with the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill, how do you think that might directly impact American travelers?
Right. So there are actually a few aspects of the Big Beautiful Bill that could affect U.S. travelers or domestic travelers. First of all, let's talk about one of the good things that came out of the bill. There was a commitment to increase investment in infrastructure, specifically air traffic control infrastructure, which we all know was a big issue with all of the chaos and problems at Newark Airport. And it's been in the headlines a lot this year. And actually, since, the pandemic, just ongoing issues with aging infrastructure and lack of staffing within air traffic control. So we are going to see hopefully that problem start to be addressed more directly with some added funding from the government. Ultimately, we want planes to be taking off on time and safely and all those things. So that is something to look forward to. As for the dip in international travelers, because of, whether it's because we're not marketing as much to them or whether because it's perception issues or whatever it might be, how that could affect U.S. travelers. Well, the verdict is still out a little bit. So for one example that came up in a story that we just published this week is with regards to hotel rates. So on the one hand, if hotels aren't filling up as much, we could see hotel rates go up because they're trying to make up for the lost revenue that they're not getting from international travelers that would normally be filling those rooms. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, sometimes we also see a discounting environment because hotel rooms, when the night passes, that is revenue that you can't make up. So as you get closer to your overnight stay, you could also see some discounting. So the pricing environment will certainly be affected by these changes in traveler behavior, but it's not exactly clear how. Another thing we're seeing is some softening of prices for travel to Europe, because we're seeing a dip in travel coming from Europe to the US. And so there's fewer seats being filled on planes in both directions. And that means that in an effort to encourage those seats to get filled up, you might see some lower prices. So there are, things to be aware of and that aren't so great for U.S. travel. And then there are some ways in which the U.S. traveler might actually stand to gain in terms of competitive pricing, for example.
And like with everything else, it seems like it remains to be seen a little bit.
Yeah.
Well,
it's all very soon.
You also interviewed Josh Earnest, who heads up communications for United. And he was one of the people who addressed the need for that investment in air traffic control infrastructure. And he was very clear that that was a really important thing, that we're seriously outdated in that way, although it's still safe. But he also addressed the challenges at Newark. And he also shared some tips that I thought were surprising, some things that travelers might see this summer. Do you want to shed some light on some of those takeaways?
So one big takeaway, first of all, is that like Newark has made a complete 180 in terms of its performance. So going from, having like a pretty catastrophic performance earlier this year to now having like an 85% on time flight rate. And so the point he was trying to make, because so much was addressed in the aftermath of that crisis, including the opening of a second runway and reducing the flight capacity at the airport to make it more manageable. Now, Newark, arguably, at least according to Josh, is an amazing airport to fly to and from. So again, another opportunity to maybe look into flights to and from Newark, because, now might be actually an amazing time to fly out of the airport.
Well, and he also said that prices right now might actually be a little lower because the secret's not quite out yet.
Exactly, because people were kind of might be staying away. And so again, to like lure people back, you might want to look into, select EWR on your Google flight search when looking for flights to and from the New York area. So a little hot tip.
Every summer, we meet for a trip.
Vacation has officially begun on Netflix.
To best enjoy your trip, we suggest the following itinerary.
I say we just wing it.
Wing it.
See where the wind takes us.
From best-selling author Emily Henry.
Are you guys like a thing? Oh, no, we're just friends. Platonic travel companions.
Comes your next favorite rom-com.
Who wants to go skinny dipping? Alex does.
Vacation, Alex!
I love it when you get weird.
People We Meet on Vacation. Now playing on Netflix. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.
So one of the other big parts, and IPW is really focused around all of these key tourism boards coming and sharing what is happening in their destination. So you interviewed several CEOs of these tourism boards, and I personally am now dying to visit all these different places around the United States, some of which I knew, some of which I didn't know so much about. So what jumped out to you the most? Like, where do you want to go within the US now?
Yeah, I mean, so many places, and which is why these conversations are so fun. I'll call out a couple. First of all, I love my conversation with Wisconsin. Like, I am so excited about Wisconsin, and I love this idea. I love an underdog story, and that's what I feel like Wisconsin kind of is. And the fact that the destination was able to transform itself into a year-round destination. Afar went as a company to Wisconsin in the dead of winter in February to Milwaukee, and I'm a typical Californian. I don't like things to be too hot. Like, just right. So I'm also a little cold averse, but I think I'm more hot averse than cold averse, and then I'm very, very crowd averse. So I love the idea of going to Wisconsin in winter and not having crowds and just, being exposed to a destination I knew very little about, and just being totally impressed with their culinary offerings, their art. I don't know. 100%. I was really surprised by Milwaukee in only good ways. And then another one is, so I really, really believe and have experienced firsthand, I believe strongly in sort of helping destinations to recover and how much value that adds to not to like the whole experience, to
Yep.
the what you're experiencing on the ground yourself, and just how much more meaningful it makes the experience. So in interviewing Adam Burke with the Los Angeles Tourism and Convention Board, I mean, I'm from Southern California. I have a lot of roots down in Southern California. So I was extremely just taken aback during the wildfires. But it's a destination that I really am eager to get back to and support the businesses that have survived, that are recovering. And for instance, something I did in the aftermath of the Maui wildfires is I went with my family and we did some volunteer experiences. And I don't know, it just like, it makes you feel like you're making a difference. And I know that sounds silly, but it just, you're connecting with the community in a way that just makes it feel like you're doing something that matters, and also brings you closer to the community because you're showing them that you care, you're showing them empathy, you're giving back. And LA has, been such a complicated destination this year between the wildfires and then there's protests, but on the other hand, they've got the Olympics coming. And so I don't know, it just made me want to kind of go and rediscover a place where I went to college and just, kind of like see how it's doing, check in on LA.
Yeah, he was great. And I think that because you talked to both Adam and Carolyn Batetta, who heads up Visit California. And one of the things that jumped out is, again, about perception was that, of course, it was catastrophic. The wildfires in LA were catastrophic. And yet it was a small portion of the city. And I think what gets portrayed is often like that the whole entire city has been impacted in this big way, or with the protests. And it is a relatively small part of the city. And I think that was just some good additional context. And then you can go and, like you said, to visit right now is to support recovery.
Yeah.
And you can go and actually have a positive impact on this place.
Exactly. And when you go to a destination that is in recovery, it's also a great opportunity to spread the word, to like let people know what you saw, what you experienced, and that you had a wonderful experience.
The reality.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, I would love to wrap up with what we were talking about earlier. This idea that the overall message from American destinations to international travelers was, we are open and you are welcome. For example, Angela Val of Visit Philadelphia and Elliot Ferguson of Destination DC were really clear about that. So what did you walk away with in terms of how the industry is approaching messaging, as well as this larger celebration of America 250 that's on the horizon?
Yeah, exactly. So Visit Philadelphia is really interesting because it's the literal birthplace of America. So they're at this moment where they are in such a great position to be the place where people go to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the country. But what I really loved was this idea of celebrating what democracy is, how it all began, what our ideals are. And I love that Angela Val really leaned into this idea of this is an opportunity to educate everyone about our history and what is great about our country and what is great about democracy. So even though we are in this complex moment in history, it is just a moment in history. And we have a long history before, and we've had a lot of challenges along the way. And so it was, like you said, so inspiring, because I think a lot of us are feeling very conflicted about what it means to live here, what it means to be American in this moment in time, and to speak to somebody who represents a destination that is at the heart and soul of the beginnings of what it is we're even celebrating next year, and who's able to address head on the complexities while also reminding us all what is so inspiring about our legacy. I just felt like it was exactly the message I needed as somebody, as like a travel writer who lives here, I'm a daughter of immigrants, like as we're all kind of grappling with where we fit into the current dialogue. I almost felt like I was like in a therapy session with Angela Val. And I was like, thank you, Angela. Like, this is everything I needed to hear, sort of reinforcing, my love in my country and the things that are great about it. So that conversation was really motivating. And also, I have to point out my conversation with Stacey Ritter from Visit Fort Lauderdale. Stacey, the funnest and funniest conversation that I had at IPW. And another one where, we talked about this, where we sort of went into these interviews not really knowing whether people would want to address the controversy, whether they'd want to get into politics. And so kind of tiptoeing into these topics. And Stacey was like, she was ready, because basically Visit Fort Lauderdale has put out a very welcoming, inclusive message, despite the fact that it is a destination within Florida that has had all these controversial policies like Don't Say Gay and other, political leanings within the state that are really kind of conflict with the message that Fort Lauderdale has been. And she was just like, this is who we are. Fort Lauderdale is welcoming. We are inclusive. And I am not going to shy away from that.
I agree. I feel like we all walked out of Angela Val's interview feeling like we were about ready to cry. And with Stacey, I was just, in the background trying not to giggle because she was so direct and so funny and picking a little fight with Miami.
Yeah, I was worried that was the Florida politics was going to be the tough question. And meanwhile, she was way more concerned about the infighting with Miami and how Fort Lauderdale is always living in the shadows of Miami, and they're ready for their time to shine. So that was another destination where I was when she was Fort Lauderdale's flip-flops and Miami's heels, I was like, I'm ready for Fort Lauderdale. I want that.
Am there. Absolutely. And as a queer traveler, they invested a ton of money in a float this year to celebrate their pride. They are a destination for gay travelers. And I was like, I will go there. I want to spend my dollars. I want to bring those dollars to a place that wants them. So yes, this is the year of Fort Lauderdale.
Right. And that was a whole other interesting aspect that this IPW conference was in June during Pride Month. And so again, Destination DC was hosting World Pride. So again, we just had these really amazing dynamic conversations about destinations that are grappling with just how to showcase how welcoming they are in an environment that may be not perceived as such, especially abroad. So just very, very impressed with how everybody showed up. They just showed up with a willingness to talk frankly. I didn't feel that we needed to shove anything under the rug. It felt just very honest.
Real conversations.
Yeah, exactly.
Which doesn't always happen. And like you said, conversations that basically make me want to go buy a ticket and travel around the U.S. So, which is the goal of that.
Exactly.
They were very successful.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Is there anything else that you felt like travelers should know, especially as they're heading into summer and fall travel?
I mean, just like I said, the exciting aspect that there are probably some deals to be had out there especially for last minute travelers, which I am very much one. So if you've been kind of trying to figure out where to go, it's a good time to shop around and be inspired. And it's a great time to show our love of our country. For whatever side of the aisle you're on, it's all of our country. I just feel very sort of re-energized about that message.
Agreed. 100%. Go America. All right. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks for having me. This was so fun.
And that's all for this special episode of Unpacked. To hear more from each of the leaders that Michelle interviewed, head over to our View from Afar podcast. Again, we've linked to all of those episodes in the show notes. Ready for more unpacking? Visit afar.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We're at Afar Media. If you enjoyed today's exploration, I hope you'll come back for more great stories. Subscribing always makes that easy, and be sure to rate and review the show on your favorite podcast platforms. It helps other travelers find it. And if you want to ask a question or suggest a topic for coverage, you can leave us a voicemail at the link in the show notes or email us at unpackedafar.com. This has been Unpacked, a production of Afar Media. The podcast is produced by Aislinn Green and Nikki Galteland. Music composition by Chris Cullen. And remember, the travel world is complicated. We're here to help you unpack it.